The scent reached me first, earthy, raw, with an undercurrent of something metallic that made my pulse quicken. Blood, pain. And beneath it all, power. Dormant but unmistakable, like lightning temporarily grounded. Our pack's autumn festival hummed around me, a symphony of sounds I'd grown adept at navigating since birth. Laughter spilled from the communal fires. Fiddles played somewhere to my left, and the rhythmic clinking of glasses punctuated conversations I'd never be part of. Being blind had made me invisible long before I presented as an omega in a world that worshipped strength above all else. Stay near the healer's tent, Eden. My father had instructed before disappearing into the festivities, his voice carrying that familiar blend of obligation and disappointment. I was 23, yet he spoke to me as though I were still a child. Fragile, burdensome, unwanted. My fingers found the wooden pendant at my throat, my grandmother's parting gift before she died. Intricately carved into the shape of a crescent moon, its surface worn smooth from years of anxious touching. Your eyes may not see the world as others do, she'd whispered, but you perceive what they cannot. Your blindness isn't absence, Eden. It's presence of a different kind. The pendant had become my talisman, a reminder that even in my perpetual darkness, I might still have purpose. I shifted uncomfortably on the rough-hewn bench, turning my face toward the night breeze that carried that strange, compelling scent again. Stronger now. My cane tapped tentatively against the packed earth as I rose. Eden? It was Mira, our pack's healer, and the closest thing I had to a friend. Where are you going? Your father specifically asked me to... I'll only be a moment, I said, cutting her off with a smile I hoped looked more confident than I felt. Nature calls. Before she could protest, I slipped away, following that magnetic pull of scent through the edges of the gathering. My cane swept methodically before me, navigating the familiar terrain of our territory. The sounds of celebration gradually dimmed behind me, replaced by the whispering of pines and the subtle symphony of night creatures. The scent grew overwhelming as I approached the old boundary stones, massive granite markers delineating where our territory ended and the forbidden forest began. Children's tales spoke of monsters lurking beyond, of wolves who had forsaken their humanity entirely. The elders used these stories to keep youngsters from wandering too far. But at that moment, something far more real than childhood fables waited in the darkness ahead. A low growl vibrated through the night air, raising the fine hairs along my arms. Then came the harsh rattle of metal, chains dragging against stone. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Who's there? My voice emerged smaller than intended. The growling ceased, replaced by labored breathing, not an animal's pant, but something caught between wolf and man. You shouldn't be here. The voice was raw, as if it hadn't been used in days, yet it carried an unmistakable command that made my omega instincts quiver in recognition. Go back to your festival, little wolf. Instead of retreating, I stepped closer, my cane finding the edge of what felt like a shallow ravine. The scent of blood was stronger here, mingled with something else. Wolfsbane, the toxic herb would weaken any werewolf, but for an alpha, it could be excruciating. You're hurt, I said, stating the obvious. A harsh laugh answered me, perceptive. I can help. You can't even see me. His words struck like a physical blow, but I'd had a lifetime to develop armor against such observations. I don't need eyes to smell the wolfsbane poisoning your blood, or to hear the chains binding you. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the occasional clink of metal as he shifted position. What's your name? I asked, kneeling at the ravine's edge. Another pause. Does it matter? It does to me. I set my cane aside and began carefully making my way down the gentle slope, using my hands to feel for secure footholds. What are you doing? Alarm colored his voice now. Stop. My name is Eden, I continued conversationally, ignoring his protest as my feet found level ground. The air was damper here, the space confined. My outstretched fingers brushed against rough stone walls. I'm the pack healer's assistant. I didn't ask, he growled. But the aggression seemed forced, masking something else, perhaps surprise. I followed his voice, moving carefully until my fingertips encountered something warm and solid, his shoulder. He flinched at the contact. Through the thin fabric of what remained of his shirt, I could feel unnatural heat radiating from his skin, fever from the wolfsbane, the chains. I murmured, hands moving cautiously along his arm. "Where are they secured? Why would you help me?" Suspicion laced his question. "Your alpha has made his position on outsiders abundantly clear. I'm not my alpha," I replied simply. My fingers found the cruel metal cuffs encircling his wrists, connected to heavy chains anchored somewhere in the stone wall. The metal burned cold against my skin, etched with symbols I couldn't see but could feel. Silver-infused bindings designed specifically to contain powerful wolves. "These are Hunter's chains," I whispered, recognition dawning. "Where did our pack get Hunter's chains?" He shifted again, the movement bringing his face closer to mine. His breath warmed my cheek as he spoke. "Perhaps your benevolent alpha isn't as honorable as you believe." The implication sent a chill through me. Hunter's chains weren't just restraints. They were torture devices created by humans who specialized in capturing werewolves. Their possession within our territory was forbidden by pack law. "Who are you?" I asked again, my fingers working at the ancient lock mechanism. My grandmother had taught me how to pick locks by feel, a useful skill for a blind girl often accidentally locked away for her own protection. "Someone who will remember this kindness," he replied enigmatically. Then softer. "The key is on the ledge above. They're overconfident." I climbed back up, feeling along the rocky shelf until my fingers closed around a small metal key. When I returned to him, his breathing had grown more labored. "The wolfsbane," I said, unlocking the first cuff. "How long?" 3 days. The restraint fell away with a heavy clank. I worked on the second cuff, aware of how he trembled beneath my touch. "Why would our pack do this? Politics," he said bitterly as the second restraint opened. "Territory, power, the eternal game." The chains fell away completely, and he exhaled, a sound of such profound relief that something in my chest constricted painfully. Without thinking, I reached toward his face, needing suddenly to know the contours of the person I was freeing. My fingertips met a strong jaw, rough with several days' growth of beard, then traced higher to find pronounced cheekbones and a straight nose. His skin burned with fever beneath my touch. He caught my wrist gently, stilling my exploration. "What do you think you're doing?" "Seeing you," I answered simply. He released my wrist slowly, allowing my fingers to continue their journey across his features. I found scars near his right temple and along his jaw, old battle marks. His hair was thick and fell past his shoulders in tangled waves. "You're not what I expected," he murmured. "Neither are you." The sudden howl of a search party shattered our strange moment of connection. They'd discovered my absence. "You need to go," I said urgently, pulling away. "They can't find you here. Come with me." The words were impulsive, spoken with a certainty that startled me. I shook my head. "I can't. My place is here. With my pack." "Your pack?" He made a sound of disbelief. "The same pack that keeps you isolated? That tolerates your existence but never values it?" His words sliced through years of carefully constructed acceptance. How could he see so clearly what I had spent a lifetime pretending not to know? "You don't know me," I protested weakly. "I see more of you in these few minutes than they have in your entire life," he countered. "But stay if you must. Just know that things are about to change." Before I could ask what he meant, he pressed something cold and metallic into my palm, one of the silver cuffs that had bound him. "Keep this," he said. "When the time comes, it will be proof of what your leaders are capable of." Another howl, closer now. Mira's voice called my name in the distance. "Go," I urged, tucking the cuff into my pocket. He caught my hand once more, bringing it to his lips in a gesture so archaic and unexpected that my breath caught. "Thank you, Eden." My name on his lips sounded like an invocation. "We will meet again." Then he was gone, his presence vanishing so completely. It was as if he'd never been there at all. Only the lingering warmth on my skin and the cold weight of the silver cuff in my pocket assured me I hadn't imagined the entire encounter. I climbed carefully back up to retrieve my cane, heart pounding with the enormity of what I'd done. As I turned to head back toward the festival lights, a terrible certainty settled in my bones. I had just altered the course of something much larger than myself. Eden! Mira's relieved voice reached me moments before her hands grasped my shoulders. What are you doing out here? The boundary stones are no place for... I got turned around. I lied, forcing a sheepish smile. The festival sounds echoed strangely. She hesitated, then sighed. Your father is looking for you. He's not pleased. Of course he wasn't. I was an embarrassment on the best of days. On festival night, with visiting packs present, my visible imperfection was particularly unwelcome. As Mira led me back toward the celebration, my fingers closed around my grandmother's pendant. For the first time in years, its familiar contours failed to comfort me. Instead, I thought of another shape, the hard angles of a silver cuff, and the promise of change that came with it. I didn't yet know it, but I had just freed the most dangerous wolf in the Western Territories, and he had marked me as his. The days following the festival passed in a strange haze of normalcy and underlying tension. I performed my usual duties in the healer's tent, grinding herbs, preparing poultices, and listening as Mira diagnosed ailments. Yet beneath this routine, something fundamental had shifted. I carried the silver cuff wrapped in cloth at the bottom of my herb bag, its weight a constant reminder of my secret. You're distracted today, Mira observed, as I nearly added foxglove instead of feverfew to a remedy. Her hand gently intercepted mine, redirecting me to the correct jar. That's the third mistake this morning. I'm sorry, I murmured, refocusing on the task. I didn't sleep well. It wasn't entirely a lie. Sleep had become elusive, my dreams haunted by a voice rough with disuse and hands burning with fever. I kept wondering who he was, this mysterious wolf I'd freed, and what he had meant about things changing. There's talk of increased patrols along the boundary stones, Mira said casually, though I detected an undercurrent of concern in her voice. Rumors of rogue wolves in the area. My fingers faltered on the mortar and pestle. Rogues? That's unusual for this territory. Mira agreed, her movements deliberate as she organized her supplies. The council meeting last night was tense. Your father seemed particularly agitated. My father, Bernard, wasn't just any pack member. He was chief enforcer, responsible for security and discipline. A position of considerable power, second only to Alpha Cress himself. Did they say what happened? I asked, striving for nonchalance. Only that there was evidence of boundary breaches. Alpha Cress has requested additional warriors from neighboring friendly packs. She paused. Eden, you didn't notice anything unusual at the festival, did you? When you wandered off? The question hung between us, weighted with implications. Mira had been my mother's closest friend before her death, and her loyalty sometimes seemed divided between her duty to the pack and her promise to watch over me. Just the usual night sounds, I lied, hating the ease with which the deception came. Why would I notice something others couldn't see? Mira sighed. Your other senses are sharper than most wolves with perfect vision, Eden. You know that as well as I do. Before I could respond, the tent flap opened, bringing with it my father's distinctive scent. Pine, leather, and the metallic edge of authority. Eden. His voice was clipped, professional. He never called me daughter in public. You're needed at the main house. A ripple of unease passed through me. The main house? Why? Alpha Cress has questions about the festival night. Several people noted your unauthorized excursion. My heart stuttered, but I kept my expression neutral as I set aside my work and reached for my cane. I've already explained to Mira. I got disoriented by the echoing sounds. Then you can explain it again, my father replied, impatience coloring his tone. To your Alpha. The walk to the main house stretched interminably, my father's grip on my elbow less a guide than a restraint. The weight of the silver cuff in my bag seemed to grow heavier with each step. A damning piece of evidence I couldn't discard but couldn't explain possessing. The main house hummed with unusual activity. I counted at least a dozen unfamiliar heartbeats and scents. Visitors, warriors from allied packs. Their conversations fell silent as we entered, curious eyes tracking our progress across the great hall. Wait here, my father instructed, depositing me on a bench before his footsteps retreated down the corridor that led to Alpha Cress's private study. I sat perfectly still, a lifetime of practice at being invisible serving me well as I focused on the snippets of conversation around me. Completely disappeared. 3 days and no trace. Border patrols doubled. Northern Alliance demanding Eden Fisher. Alpha Cress's voice sliced through the murmurs, silencing the room. Come. I rose, using my cane to navigate the now quiet hall. Alpha Cress had always made me uneasy. His scent carried excessive amounts of cologne to mask his natural odor. A tactic I'd learned was common among those with something to hide. The study door closed behind me with ominous finality. The room held 4 distinct heartbeats. Alpha Cress's rapid, agitated rhythm, my father's controlled, steady pulse, and 2 strangers whose scents marked them as alphas from other packs. "Miss Fisher?" began Alpha Cress, his voice oily with false concern. "I understand you spent some time near the boundary stones during the festival." I tightened my grip on my cane. Briefly. I became disoriented by the noise and wandered too far. Mira found me and brought me back. "How convenient," observed one of the strangers, his voice deep and threaded with skepticism, "that you should wander precisely where our prisoner was being held." A chill washed over me. I fought to keep my expression neutral, grateful for once that my unseeing eyes couldn't betray me. "Prisoner? I don't understand." "Don't play naive, girl," snapped the second stranger. "The chains were unlocked, not broken. Someone helped him escape." "Perhaps you should explain what this is about," I suggested, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I can hardly confess to something when I don't know what occurred." A heavy silence followed, broken by Alpha Cress clearing his throat. 3 days before the festival, our patrols apprehended an intruder in our territory, a powerful alpha wolf traveling alone, which is suspicious enough. Upon questioning, he refused to identify himself or his pack. Given the current political climate, we detained him temporarily. The casual way he described imprisonment with silver-infused chains made my stomach turn. "And now he's gone," my father added, his voice flat. "The night you happened to wander to the exact location where he was being held." "I heard nothing and no one," I insisted, the lie bitter on my tongue. "If you detained someone, and they escaped, perhaps you should question your security measures rather than a blind Omega who can barely find the dining hall without assistance." The barb landed as intended. My father's heartbeat spiked with anger, and Alpha Cress shifted uncomfortably. "Watch your tone," my father warned. "The girl has a point," conceded the first stranger, unexpected amusement in his voice. "If Darius Vale could be contained by anything short of specialized hunter chains, he wouldn't be the Alpha King of the Northern Territories." The name fell like a stone into still water, rippling through my consciousness. Darius Vale, the Alpha King, the most powerful werewolf in 1,000 miles, ruler of the largest coalition of packs in the Western Hemisphere. I had freed the Alpha King. The room's atmosphere shifted palpably as the implications settled around us. If they discovered my involvement, it wouldn't just mean punishment, it would mean war. The Northern Territories had been in an uneasy peace with our Southern Alliance for generations, but tensions had been rising under Alpha Cress's leadership. "Regardless," Alpha Cress continued, "we need to determine how he escaped. Everyone who went near the boundary stones that night must be questioned." "Including your own son?" asked the second stranger pointedly. "I understand Oliver was on patrol duty." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Oliver Cress, the Alpha's only son and heir, was notorious for his cruelty and ambition. If he had been responsible for guarding the prisoner, "My son's loyalty is beyond question," Alpha Cress responded coldly. "Unlike certain elements within our pack." The accusation hung in the air, its target unclear, but its threat unmistakable. "I've told you everything I know," I said into the tense silence. "May I return to my duties now? Mira is expecting my help with the seasonal remedies." "For now," Alpha Cress conceded. "But do not leave the central compound until this matter is resolved. That applies to everyone." I nodded and turned to leave, relieved when no one offered to escort me. As I reached for the door handle, Alpha Cress added, "Oh, and Eden, if you happen to hear anything relevant to this situation, I trust you'll bring it directly to your father or myself." "Of course, Alpha," I replied dutifully, slipping out before my racing heart could betray me. I made my way carefully back through the great hall, now emptier than before, and out onto the main path. Instead of returning directly to the healer's tent, I veered toward the small stream that ran behind our settlement. I needed space to think, to process the enormity of what I had done. Darius Vale, the Alpha King. I found my usual spot, a smooth boulder warmed by the afternoon sun, and sat, allowing the gentle burble of water to soothe my frayed nerves. My fingers found the silver cuff in my bag, tracing its intricate engravings. "You look troubled, little healer," I startled violently, nearly toppling into the stream. The voice, his voice, came from directly across the narrow waterway where no one had been standing moments before. "How?" I began, then lowered my voice to a harsh whisper. "Are you insane? There are search parties everywhere looking for you." "For Darius Vale, yes," he agreed, amusement threading through his words. "But they're looking for a desperate, injured alpha on the run, not a well-dressed merchant traveling openly on the main road." I shook my head in disbelief. "You're still in our territory? Why would you risk that?" "I had unfinished business." The lightness disappeared from his tone, and it seems I was right to stay. "They're questioning you." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway, suddenly acutely aware that I was alone with the most powerful alpha in the known territories, a wolf who had every reason to despise my pack. "They don't suspect me," I assured him, wondering why I felt compelled to ease his concern. "They think I'm too limited to have helped you escape." "Their mistake," he said simply. "One of many." The stream gurgled between us, a fragile boundary. I should call for help, I thought distantly. I should alert the pack that Darius Vale was here, in our territory, within capturing distance. Instead, I asked, what did Alpha Crest do to provoke the Northern Territories? A surprised chuckle escaped him. "Direct, aren't you?" "Nothing yet, but he's been building toward something. Stockpiling weapons, forming new alliances, sending scouts into neutral territories." "You came to spy on us," I realized. "I came to confirm my suspicions personally," he corrected. Leaders should never delegate understanding. Something in his voice, a weight of responsibility beyond mere authority, made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about pack politics. We'd been taught that the Northern Territories were aggressive expansionists, that Alpha Crest's increasingly militant policies were necessary defenses. "If you're caught here," I began. "I won't be," he interrupted confidently, "but you might be, if you're seen speaking to thin air. To anyone watching, you're alone, enjoying a peaceful moment by the stream." I tilted my head, reassessing his position. "You're using a concealment charm. Such magic was rare and costly, another indication of his resources and power." "Clever girl," he approved. "Now tell me what they asked you." I hesitated only briefly before recounting the interrogation. As I spoke, I became aware of a subtle shift in his scent. The wolfsbane taint had faded, replaced by something headier and more potent. He had recovered his strength. "They're preparing for something," I concluded. "The visitors, the increased security, it feels like more than just searching for an escaped prisoner." "It is," he confirmed grimly. "Your alpha is making his final preparations. That's why I needed to confirm his intentions personally." "Final preparations for what?" "War, Eden. He plans to attack the Northern Territories during the Blue Moon. The Blue Moon, a rare second full moon in a month, would occur in just 2 weeks. During such moons, werewolves experienced heightened strength but decreased control, making it both a powerful and dangerous time for any major action." "That's insane," I whispered. "Our pack isn't strong enough to challenge the Northern Territories. Not alone." "No," Darius agreed. "But with the mercenaries he's been quietly recruiting and the weapons he's acquired from the hunters, he believes he has the advantage of surprise." I shook my head, trying to process this revelation. "Why are you telling me this? Why come back at all?" A long silence followed, broken only by the stream's constant murmur and the distant sounds of the pack going about their daily routines. "Because I need someone on the inside," he finally said, his voice dropping lower. "And because I've never encountered an Omega who would free a chained alpha without expecting anything in return." You want me to spy on my own pack? I asked incredulously. To betray them? I want you to help prevent a senseless war, he countered. Your alpha is leading your people to slaughter, Eden. When he fails, and he will fail, the retribution from the northern packs will be devastating. A cold dread settled in my stomach as I recognized the truth in his words. Alpha Cress was many things, but a military tactician he was not. His plan was born of hubris, not strategy. What would you have me do? I asked, my voice barely audible. Listen, report. That's all for now, Darius replied. I'll find you again in 3 days. Before I could respond, a twig snapped nearby, followed by a familiar scent, Oliver Cress. Someone's coming, I hissed. I know, Darius said calmly. Remember, Eden, they can't see me. Footsteps approached deliberately, then stopped a few yards away. Talking to the spirits again, freak? Oliver's mocking voice carried clearly across the small clearing. Or have you finally lost what's left of your mind? I schooled my features into the blank mask I'd perfected over years of his torments. Just enjoying the peace, Oliver. Something you wouldn't understand. Brave words from the pack invalid. He sneered, coming closer. Father wants you back at the healer's tent. Apparently, your particular deficiencies are needed. I rose, gathering my dignity along with my cane. I'll go immediately. As I moved to pass him, Oliver caught my arm in a bruising grip. I know you're hiding something, he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. And when I find out what it is, not even your father's position will protect you. I yanked my arm free, heart pounding. Touch me again, and I'll report you to Alpha Cress for interfering with the pack healer's assistant. Even you aren't above pack law, Oliver. His laughter followed me as I made my way back toward the settlement, my thoughts in turmoil. Across the stream, invisible to all but me by some magical deception, the Alpha King had witnessed my humiliation and had done nothing to stop it. Why did that sting more than Oliver's familiar cruelty? 3 days stretched like years, each hour fraught with new tensions. The pack compound transformed into a militarized zone. Training sessions extended long into the night, weapons were distributed openly, and guards patrolled in patterns I memorized by their footfalls. Through it all, I moved like a ghost, collecting snippets of conversation, cataloging changes, and waiting. Hold still, Mira instructed as she demonstrated a new binding technique on my arm. We were alone in the healer's tent, preparing supplies for what Alpha Cress euphemistically called upcoming territorial negotiations. These aren't peace offerings, I observed quietly, fingers tracing the battle dressings designed for grievous wounds. We're making field medicine. Mira's hands faltered momentarily. It's not our place to question Alpha decisions. It's precisely our place, I countered, lowering my voice further. We're the ones who'll be putting bodies back together. She released my arm, sighing heavily. What would you have us do, Eden? The orders come directly from Alpha Cress. Even your father doesn't question them. My father. In the days since my interrogation, he had become increasingly distant, returning to our cabin well after midnight, reeking of weapons oil and tension. When he did speak, it was in terse directives. Stay in the compound, avoid the visiting wolves, report anything unusual immediately. Something's happening tonight, I said, changing the subject. I overheard Oliver telling his lieutenants to prepare the ceremonial circle. Mira stiffened beside me. The binding ritual? But that's only for pack unions, I finished. Exactly. The air between us thickened with unspoken implications. Pack unions were rare, strategic alliances cemented through mating bonds between high-ranking members. In times of conflict, they were political tools, not love matches. Whose union? Mira finally asked. I don't know, I admitted, but given the timing, a commotion outside interrupted our speculation. Raised voices, the thud of heavy boots, and the acrid scent of wolf blood. Moments later, the tent flap whipped open. Healer, barked an unfamiliar voice. We need assistance. Mira moved immediately, her healer's instincts overriding everything else. What happened? Border Patrol encountered hostiles, the warrior reported grimly. 2 wounded, 1 critical. My hands moved automatically, preparing the work table with supplies Mira would need. The wounded were brought in, 2 of Alpha Cress's elite guards, their scents familiar though their names escaped me. The first had superficial lacerations, but the second, Eden. Pressure here, Mira directed, guiding my hands to a wound that pumped hot blood at an alarming rate. The injured wolf whimpered as I applied firm pressure. "Who attacked you?" I asked quietly as Mira gathered her tools. "Northern scouts," he gasped. 3 of them, watching the eastern approach. "We engaged, but—" He broke off, groaning as Mira began cleaning his wound. "But what?" I prompted. "They were expecting us," he managed, almost like they knew our patrol routes. I absorbed this information silently, maintaining pressure on his wound. Northern scouts within our borders meant Darius had sent his own people, or that he hadn't been as alone as Alpha Cress believed during his captivity. For the next hour, I assisted Mira in stabilizing the injured wolves, my thoughts churning beneath a carefully maintained facade of professional focus. When we finished, the less injured guard departed to report to Alpha Cress, while the critical patient fell into an exhausted sleep. "You should rest," Mira told me, her own fatigue evident in her voice. "I'll watch him." "I'm fine," I assured her. "Besides, I heard there's to be a ceremony tonight. You'll need your strength if we're called to attend." She hesitated. "Eden, if there is a pack union, you should prepare yourself. These alliances can shift pack dynamics significantly." Her warning carried an undercurrent of something more specific, a concern directed at me particularly. Before I could press her for details, the tent flap opened again, and my father's unmistakable presence filled the small space. "Eden," he said, his tone uncharacteristically gentle. "Come, we need to talk." A cold dread settled in my stomach as I gathered my things and followed him outside. We walked in silence through the compound, the evening air thick with anticipation. Wolves gathered in small clusters, conversations hushing as we passed. My father led me not toward our cabin but to Alpha Cress's main house. "Father," I began hesitantly. "What's happening?" He stopped abruptly, turning to face me. Through my heightened senses, I detected an unfamiliar emotion emanating from him, regret. "You've always been different," he said finally. "Not just your blindness. You see things others miss, understand what isn't spoken." "I compensate," I replied cautiously. "No." His hand settled heavily on my shoulder. "It's more than that. Your grandmother saw it too. It's why she spent so much time teaching you, preparing you." He paused. "She knew this day might come." "What day?" A tremor entered my voice. "Father, you're scaring me." "Tonight, Alpha Cress will announce a strategic alliance with the Southern Ridge Pack. Their warriors are already en route to support our territorial expansion." The diplomatic phrase couldn't mask the reality. War. He was confirming what Darius had warned. Alpha Cress was launching an offensive against the Northern Territories. "And what does this have to do with me?" I asked, though something in his scent told me I already knew the answer. "The alliance will be sealed through a pack union," he said, his voice dropping lower. "Between Oliver Cress and a worthy Omega from our pack." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "No," I whispered. "You can't mean—" "It's an honor, Eden," my father insisted, his grip on my shoulder tightening painfully. "You'll be elevated to Alpha's mate-in-law. Your children will be pack heirs." "My children?" I repeated numbly. "With Oliver?" Oliver Cress, who had tormented me since childhood, who called me freak and defect, who had once held me underwater in the pack lake until I nearly drowned, then told everyone I had fallen in due to my disability. "The Alpha himself requested you specifically," my father continued, as if this were some great privilege. "Your condition is offset by your lineage and your healing abilities. The bloodline is strong. My condition," I echoed hollowly. "My blindness. The thing that had defined my existence, that had made me invisible and insignificant to the pack, was now merely an inconvenient footnote in a political calculation." "You always wanted to contribute to the pack," my father said, misinterpreting my shock for hesitation. "This is your chance, Eden, to finally have worth." The casual cruelty of his assessment, that I had no worth until now, struck deeper than any physical blow. My entire life reduced to this: a broodmare for the pack, chosen not for myself, but for what my bloodline might produce. "Do I have a choice?" I asked, already knowing the answer. My father's silence was confirmation enough. Inside Alpha Cress's house, women I barely knew stripped away my simple healer's clothes and bathed me in scented oils. They dressed me in unfamiliar finery, combed out my light blonde hair until it fell in waves down my back, and adorned my neck with ceremonial beads that felt like a collar. Through it all, I remained eerily calm, as if watching the proceedings happen to someone else. The silver cuff, my one tangible connection to Darius Vale, had been hidden in my private herb cache before my father collected me. I wondered if I would ever retrieve it. "Beautiful," someone murmured as they finished their preparations. "No one will even notice her eyes." As if my unseeing gaze were the only flaw to be disguised. As if this entire arrangement weren't founded on viewing me as damaged goods, being generously elevated beyond my station. They led me to a small antechamber to wait for the ceremony. Through the walls, I could hear the gathering crowd, the ceremonial drums beginning their slow rhythm, the murmur of expectant voices. Somewhere out there, Oliver Cress was waiting to claim me as his mate, a union that would bind me irrevocably to a wolf I feared and despised. I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, breath measured and even as my grandmother had taught me. My mind, however, raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. Could I run? Where would I go? The territory borders were heavily patrolled now. Could I refuse? The consequences would fall not just on me, but on my father, whose position would become untenable. The door opened, and Alpha Cress's distinctive cologne-masked scent filled the small room. "Eden Fisher," he greeted me, false warmth coating his words. "You look magnificent, a worthy mate for my son." I inclined my head in acknowledgement, not trusting my voice. "I understand this arrangement may seem sudden," he continued, pacing the small space. "But these are extraordinary times requiring extraordinary measures. The union between you and Oliver will strengthen our pack at a critical juncture." "May I ask why me?" The question slipped out before I could reconsider. "Surely there are other Omegas more suitable." Alpha Cress paused his pacing. "You underestimate your value, child. Your lineage is impeccable. Your grandmother was one of our most powerful healers, and your mother, before her unfortunate passing, showed remarkable abilities. The Fisher bloodline carries unique qualities that will serve the Cress line well." He spoke of my family like prized breeding stock, reducing generations of women to their genetic contributions. "And my blindness?" I pressed, a dangerous edge entering my tone. "Is that also a desirable quality for the Cress line?" "A minor inconvenience," he dismissed carelessly, "and one that has its uses. Your other senses are extraordinarily developed, a trait that could manifest powerfully in future generations." Before I could respond to this cold calculation, the ceremonial drums changed their pattern, a summoning rhythm that made my heart stutter with dread. My time had run out. "They're calling for us," Alpha Cress announced, extending his arm. "I will escort you to the circle, as your father has ceded that right to me." "A great honor." I rose mechanically, allowing him to guide me from the antechamber into the great hall where the pack had assembled. The collective intake of breath as we entered told me my appearance had achieved the desired effect. No one was seeing Eden, the blind Omega healer's assistant. They were seeing a vessel for pack advancement, dressed appropriately for sacrifice. We processed slowly through the gathered wolves, their sense a dizzying mixture of excitement, curiosity, and beneath it all, a current of bloodlust that had nothing to do with the union ceremony. These wolves were preparing for war, and my mating was merely the prelude. At the center of the hall waited Oliver, his scent a noxious mix of anticipation and triumph. Beside him stood another alpha, presumably the leader of the Southern Ridge Pack, our new allies. The ceremonial circle had been laid out with herbs and sacred woods, their fragrances mingling with the smoke from ritual fires. Alpha Cress positioned me opposite his son, then stepped back to address the gathering. His speech blurred into meaningless sounds, as panic finally began to overtake me. This was happening. In moments, I would be bound to Oliver Cress, my body and future no longer my own. My grandmother's pendant hung heavy against my throat, suddenly seeming less a talisman and more a weight dragging me down. What had she meant about my blindness being a different kind of presence? What preparation had she believed she was giving me? "Join these two wolves in sacred union," Alpha Cress was saying, his voice cutting through my spiraling thoughts. "Together, they will forge a new future for our united packs." Cheers erupted around us. Oliver's hand closed around mine, his grip possessive and uncomfortably tight. I could feel his satisfaction radiating like heat. "You look almost worthy of me," he whispered, his breath hot against my ear. "I'll enjoy taming that stubborn spirit of yours." The traditional ceremonial wine was placed in my free hand, the draft that would begin the binding ritual. Once consumed, we would proceed to the physical claiming, the bite that would mark me irrevocably as Oliver's mate. I raised the cup to my lips, mind blank with terror. A howl shattered the ceremonial atmosphere, not from within the hall, but from somewhere outside the compound. A howl so powerful, so commanding, that every wolf present froze instinctively. It was the call of an alpha, not just any alpha, the Alpha King. The cup slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers, spilling ceremonial wine across the pristine circle. Oliver's grip tightened painfully on my wrist as chaos erupted around us. Warriors scrambled for weapons. Orders were shouted over the panicked murmurs of the gathering, and through it all, Alpha Cress's voice rose in commanding fury. "Secure the perimeter. All warriors to defensive positions." A second howl answered the first, then a third, and a fourth, until the night air trembled with the unified voice of what could only be a massive pack. The Northern Territories had arrived, not as unsuspecting victims of our attack, but as calculated aggressors who had chosen their moment perfectly. The ceremony must be completed, the Southern Ridge Alpha insisted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The alliance must be sealed before battle. "There's no time," Alpha Cress countered. "Get your warriors in position." "Oliver." "I'll complete what we started," Oliver snarled, yanking me toward him with bruising force. "This one's mine, ceremony or not." Terror electrified my system as I realized his intent to claim me anyway, hastily and forcefully before joining the battle. I struggled against his grip, all pretense of submission abandoned. "Let me go," I demanded, twisting away from him. "You need to defend the pack. You are pack property," he growled, his words slurring slightly as he began the partial shift that preceded claiming. "And I take what's mine." His clawed hand tore at the ceremonial dress, shredding the delicate fabric as he dragged me toward the antechamber. Around us, the great hall had emptied of all but the most elderly and infirm as every able-bodied wolf rushed to defensive positions. "You're making a mistake," I warned, fighting his pull with every ounce of strength. "The Alpha King is about to learn what happens to trespassers," Oliver sneered. "After I finish with you." We had reached the antechamber door when the great hall's main entrance burst open. The sudden silence that followed was more terrifying than any battle sound could have been. Oliver's grip on me loosened fractionally as he turned toward the disturbance. "What the?" he began, then fell abruptly silent. A familiar scent washed over me. Earth and power. No longer tainted by wolfsbane, but intensified by something primal and electric. Darius Vale had entered Alpha Cress's great hall, and from the shocked stillness around us, he hadn't come alone. "I believe," came his voice, cold and precise as a blade, "that you're handling my mate rather roughly, pup." His mate. My mind struggled to process his words as Oliver's grip became crushing. "Your mate?" Oliver's voice rose in disbelief. "This blind Omega, she belongs to our pack, to me." "Eden belongs to no one," Darius replied evenly, "but she is mine to protect, as I am hers. A debt incurred when she freed me from your father's silver chains." A collective gasp rippled through the remaining pack members. Oliver's shock translated into fury as he shoved me behind him, his body beginning the full shift to wolf form. "Traitor!" he spat at me. "You'll die with your northern dog." Everything happened too quickly then. Oliver lunged toward Darius, fully shifted between one heartbeat and the next. There was a blur of movement, the sickening sound of impact, and then Stillness. Is he... I couldn't complete the question, my voice barely audible. Unconscious, Darius answered, suddenly much closer. His hand, warm and steady, found mine. Are you hurt? I shook my head, still trying to comprehend what was happening. You called me your mate. A conversation for another time, he said softly. Right now, we need to move. My wolves have surrounded the compound, but your Alpha's forces are substantial, and your new southern allies arrived earlier today. War, I whispered. Not if we can prevent it. His hand moved to my elbow, guiding me toward the exit. There's still a chance for negotiation, but I need proof of Cress's intentions, evidence that he was planning to attack the Northern Territories unprovoked. The silver cuff, the hunter's chains. The proof was hidden in my herb cache, but to reach it, we'd need to cross the compound now erupting into chaos. I have what you need, I told him. But it's in the healer's tent. His brief silence spoke volumes. That's on the other side of the compound. I know the way, I said, with more confidence than I felt. There are hidden paths, service routes the healers use during emergencies. If the fighting is centered on the main approaches... It's too dangerous, he began. This entire situation is dangerous, I countered, but without proof, this ends in bloodshed no matter what. Another howl split the night, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sounds of combat. Darius cursed softly, then made his decision. Stay close to me, he instructed. If I tell you to run, you run. Back toward this building. My wolves will find you. I nodded, clutching my grandmother's pendant for courage as we slipped out a servant's entrance and into the chaos of a pack at war. The night air carried the metallic tang of blood and the acrid scent of fear. Darius moved with predatory grace beside me, his body a constant shield as we navigated the narrow service path between buildings. I had walked this route countless times, but never with such stakes, never with war erupting around us. Left here, I whispered, tugging gently at his sleeve. The sounds of fighting concentrated near the main gates, but smaller skirmishes erupted across the compound like deadly constellations. Your Alphas deployed most of his forces at the north entrance, Darius observed quietly. He doesn't realize we've already infiltrated from the east. The Southern Ridge wolves? Contained, he answered with grim satisfaction. My second-in-command intercepted them before they could fully mobilize. We paused at the junction between two storage buildings. Ahead lay an open courtyard we would need to cross to reach the healer's quarter. My ears caught the sound of patrolling guards. 2 sets of footsteps moving in a standard sweep pattern. Wait, I breathed, gripping Darius's arm. 3, 2, 1. The patrol passed, and we slipped forward into the momentary safety of their blind spot. Darius's surprise radiated from him in waves. You mapped their patrol routes, he realized. I map everything, I replied simply. It's how I survive. His hand found mine, squeezing briefly before we continued across the exposed ground. The healer's tent glowed faintly ahead, a single lantern burning inside. Through the canvas, I could make out Mira's silhouette as she prepared for the inevitable wounded. Someone's inside, Darius noted. Mira, the head healer. She won't betray us. He made a non-committal sound but followed as I led us around to the back entrance, a small flap used for disposal of medical waste, rarely monitored. We slipped inside, and I immediately detected Mira's sharp intake of breath. Eden? What? She broke off, no doubt registering Darius's imposing presence. Alpha King Vale, she breathed, dropping instinctively into a respectful bow. You know him? I asked, startled. Any healer trained in the old traditions would recognize the Alpha King, she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heartbeat. What I don't understand is why he's here with you, dressed in ceremonial clothes meant for a union with Oliver Cress. A union that won't happen, Darius stated flatly. Eden, the evidence? I moved to my private workspace, feeling beneath the work table for the loose floorboard where I'd hidden the silver cuff. My fingers closed around the cold metal, and I withdrew it carefully. Hunter's chains, I explained, handing the cuff to Darius. Alpha Cress used them to imprison Darius while claiming he was simply questioning an intruder. Mira gasped, Silver-infused binding chains? Those are forbidden by pack law, as is planning an unprovoked attack on the Northern Territories during the Blue Moon, I added. Which is exactly what Alpha Cress has been preparing for. Darius examined the cuff, his expression hardening as he traced the cruel engravings. This is enough to demand a formal tribunal, he said, with witnesses from neutral territories present. A commotion outside interrupted our planning, shouting, followed by the thundering of multiple footsteps approaching the healer's tent. They're coming, Mira warned, moving swiftly to the entrance. I'll delay them. You two, out the back now. Mira, I began, afraid for her safety. Go, she insisted. Your grandmother would be proud, Eden. Now go. Darius pulled me toward the rear exit, but we'd barely made it 3 steps when the main entrance burst open. My father's scent hit me first, followed by the metallic smell of fresh blood. Traitor! He snarled, the word barely recognizable through his partially shifted jaw. My own daughter. Darius pushed me behind him, a growl building in his chest. Your daughter showed more honor in one act of compassion than your entire pack has demonstrated in years of leadership. You know nothing of honor, northern dog. My father spat. Eden, come here now. Your alpha is calling for you. Terror froze me in place. Not for myself, but for what might happen next. My father was a formidable enforcer, but against the Alpha King. Bernard, Mira intervened, her healer's authority evident in her tone. Think about what you're doing. The compound is under attack. There are wounded needing attention. Is this personal vendetta worth more than your duty to the pack? My father hesitated, his ragged breathing the only sound in the suddenly still tent. Then, from outside, Alpha Cress's voice carried with unnatural volume. Find the traitor! Find Eden Fisher and bring her to me, alive. The momentary indecision shattered. My father lunged toward us, fully shifting mid-leap. Darius met him in the air with a collision that shook the entire structure. They fell in a tangle of snarls and snapping teeth, 2 powerful wolves locked in combat. Eden, run! Mira shouted, grabbing supplies and shoving them into my hands. The northern path, through the old willow grove. I stood frozen, the sounds of battle, both the larger conflict outside and the personal one before me, overwhelming my senses. My father and Darius fought with lethal intent, neither giving ground, the sickening sounds of tearing flesh and growls filling the small space. I can't leave him, I whispered, clutching the supplies Mira had thrust at me. He's the Alpha King, Mira reminded me sharply. Your father is the one outmatched. Now go, for all our sakes. A pained yelp cut through the chaos, my father's voice. The fighting stopped abruptly, and Darius's human voice, rough with exertion, filled the silence. Stay down if you want to live, Enforcer. I moved toward the sound, my free hand outstretched. It found Darius first, his shoulder heaving with effort, skin slick with sweat and blood. Beyond him, my father lay in human form, defeated, but alive. Eden, he rasped, and the broken quality of his voice tore at something deep inside me. Why? The question contained multitudes. Why had I freed Darius? Why had I betrayed the pack? Why had I rejected the future laid out for me? But beneath it all lay the real question. Why had I never been the daughter he wanted? Because I had to see with more than just my eyes, I answered softly. Grandmother tried to teach me that. I think she tried to teach you too. Something shifted in his scent, a flash of grief quickly suppressed. Your grandmother was a dreamer, and dreamers die, Eden, just like your mother. Darius's hand settled on my shoulder. We need to move, he urged. That call went out to every warrior in the compound. I nodded, but couldn't leave without one last truth. I never wanted to betray you, Father, but I couldn't be part of something that would destroy so many lives, including our own. He turned his face away, defeat and shame radiating from him in waves. It was all the response I would get. We fled through the back exit, Darius guiding me swiftly toward the northern boundary. The willow grove Mira had mentioned lay just beyond the training fields, a place rarely frequented due to local superstitions about spirits dwelling among the ancient trees. Your father will live, Darius said as we ran, correctly interpreting my distress. I struck to incapacitate, not kill. It doesn't matter, I replied, the words catching painfully in my throat. To him, I'm already dead. Darius's stride faltered momentarily before he pressed on. Family is more than blood and obligation, Eden. Sometimes it's found in unexpected places. The fighting grew more distant as we approached the willow grove. The air here felt different, cooler, heavy with moisture from the nearby stream, and strangely still, as if the chaos couldn't penetrate this ancient sanctuary. We're close to the boundary, I said, recognizing the particular scent of wild violets that grew abundantly near the northern stones. Your pack will meet us just beyond. He slowed our pace, his hand never leaving my arm. Eden, before we cross, I need to tell you something. The gravity in his voice made me pause, turning toward him. What is it? When I called you my mate back there, it wasn't just a tactical move to protect you. My heart stuttered. What do you mean? There's a reason I came back, he said, his voice dropping lower. A reason I couldn't simply send others to gather intelligence. From the moment you freed me, from the moment you saw me with your hands when others had only seen a prisoner, something changed. You don't know me, I protested weakly, echoing the words I'd spoken to him days ago by the ravine. I know enough, he countered gently. I know your courage, your compassion, your loyalty. Even when it costs you everything, I know you value truth over comfort, and action over words. His fingers brushed my cheek, feather light. I would know more if you'd allow it. Before I could respond, howls erupted from just beyond the boundary. Not battle cries, but signals, his pack calling to their alpha. We need to go, I said, the moment slipping away as reality reasserted itself. Your people need you. He made a sound of frustration, but didn't press further. We moved through the final stretch of willows, their trailing branches caressing my face like ghostly fingers. As we emerged on the other side, the sense of unfamiliar wolves surrounded us. Northern Territory pack members forming a protective circle. Alpha! Greeted a female voice, deep with authority. The southern forces have retreated. Cress is calling for a parley. Of course he is, Darius replied grimly, now that he's lost his advantage of surprise. He turned to me. Eden, this is Selene, my beta. The Omega who freed you, Selena observed, her tone revealing nothing of her thoughts on this development. She doesn't look like much. I lifted my chin slightly, and yet, here we are. A beat of silence. Then Selene laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. I see why he came back for you. To Darius, she added, the neutral territory representatives have arrived. They're waiting at the eastern clearing. Darius's hand found mine again. Come, it's time to end this, with words instead of teeth, if possible. We moved as a unit through the forest, the northern wolves forming a loose protective formation around us. I listened to their movements, noting the discipline and coordination that spoke of a well-led pack. These weren't the bloodthirsty barbarians Alpha Cress had described in his propaganda. They were a cohesive family under strong leadership. The eastern clearing, traditionally used for inter-pack negotiations, smelled of ceremonial sage and the distinctive scent of the neutral territory enforcers, wolves specially trained to maintain peace during formal proceedings. As we approached, conversations hushed. Alpha King, greeted an elderly female voice, resonating with natural authority. We've received disturbing reports of unprovoked aggression. Grand Elder, Darius acknowledged respectfully. I bring evidence and a witness. My stomach tightened as I realized my role in what would come next. I would have to testify against my own pack, against my father, before representatives from territories spanning hundreds of miles. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back to the life I had known. The Grand Elder approached, her scent a complex blend of age, wisdom, and carefully controlled power. You are the witness? She asked, stopping directly before me. Yes, Elder, I replied, instinctively lowering my gaze, though she couldn't see it. Eden Fisher, Omega Healer of the Southern Crescent Pack. Her hand, surprisingly warm and strong for one so old, tilted my face upward. A blind wolf, she observed, not unkindly. And yet you've seen much, haven't you, child? Something in her tone suggested she understood more than just my physical condition. Yes, Elder, The proceedings began formally, with representatives from 7 neutral territories forming a semicircle around a central fire. Alpha Cress arrived with a small delegation, including my father, whose scent carried the unmistakable notes of recent healing. Mira's work, no doubt. This tribunal is called to address accusations of territorial aggression and violations of pack law, announced the Grand Elder. Alpha Darius Vale of the Northern Territories claims that Alpha Gregory Cress of the Southern Crescent Pack imprisoned him using forbidden hunter's chains and was preparing an unprovoked attack during the upcoming blue moon. Alpha Cress's denial came swift and indignant. Preposterous. Vale was trespassing in our territory. We detained him briefly for questioning, as is our right. Any preparations we've made are purely defensive, in response to northern aggression along our borders. The silver cuff was presented as evidence, passed among the neutral representatives who examined the forbidden engravings with expressions of grave concern. And how do you explain the presence of silver-infused binding chains in your territory, Alpha Cress? Asked a stern-faced representative from the Western Mountains. Those aren't ours, Alpha Cress lied smoothly. For all we know, Vale brought them himself to fabricate this entire scenario. Murmurs of doubt rippled through the gathering. It was a clever defense, his word against Darius's, with little to prove either case definitively. Then the Grand Elder spoke again. We have a witness who claims otherwise, she said, motioning me forward. Eden Fisher, step into the circle and speak your truth. Darius's hand squeezed mine briefly before releasing me. I moved carefully into the center, the heat of the ceremonial fire warming my face as all eyes turned to me. Eden Fisher. My father's voice cut through the silence, strained with barely contained emotion. Consider carefully what you're about to do. It wasn't quite a threat, but the warning was clear. I was about to sever my last ties to my pack, my family, my entire life. I already have, I replied softly, then turned to address the tribunal. 3 nights before our autumn festival, I overheard Alpha Cress ordering my father to procure special restraints for a high-value prisoner. During the festival, I followed a scent of blood and wolfsbane to the Boundary Ravine, where I found Alpha Vale chained with silver-infused bindings. And you freed him? The Grand Elder prompted. Yes. He was suffering from wolfsbane poisoning and had been restrained for 3 days. The key was left carelessly nearby. They never expected anyone to find him there, especially not... I hesitated. Especially not a blind Omega, finished Alpha Cress with contempt. How convenient that the one witness is a wolf with a well-documented history of disorientation and confusion. She can barely navigate the compound without assistance. Are we to believe she not only located a secret prisoner, but managed to free him undetected? Anger flared hot and sudden in my chest. My blindness has never affected my intelligence or my integrity, Alpha Cress. Nor has it diminished my other senses, which is how I knew that the wolfsbane dosage you were administering would have eventually killed him, which is how I heard your son Oliver discussing patrol schedules to ensure no one would discover your prisoner, which is how I found the documentation in your study detailing attack plans against the Northern Territories, scheduled for the Blue Moon. A shocked silence followed my revelation. I hadn't told anyone, not even Darius, about the documents I discovered while delivering medicinal tea to Alpha Cress's study 2 days earlier. Unable to read them visually, I'd memorized their location and enlisted Mira's unknowing help in learning their contents by asking her to organize the scattered papers. You dare accuse me of planning unprovoked aggression? Alpha Cress thundered, but beneath his outrage, I detected the sour note of fear. Based on documents you couldn't possibly have read? The battle maps are in the 3rd drawer of your eastern cabinet, I continued calmly. The mercenary payment records are hidden beneath the false bottom of your ceremonial chest, and the hunter's contact information is encoded in your personal ledger. Though not well enough to escape detection when read aloud, the Western Mountains representative spoke up. These are serious allegations that can be easily verified through a sanctioned search of Alpha Cress's quarters. This is absurd, Alpha Cress protested. The word of a defective Omega against a pack Alpha? She's clearly been manipulated by Vale, possibly even ensorcelled. Enough. The Grand Elder's command silenced him instantly. Eden Fisher has provided specific verifiable claims. Furthermore, she continued, her tone softening slightly, I sense no deception in her words. only pain at betraying her pack to prevent a greater tragedy. She turned to the gathered representatives. I propose an immediate inspection of Alpha Cress's quarters, conducted by neutral territory enforcers. The motion carried unanimously. As enforcers departed to search the Alpha's residence, the tension in the clearing became nearly unbearable. My father would not look at me, his scent a complex mixture of anger, shame, and something else. A grudging acknowledgement, perhaps, that I had shown more courage than he had expected. Alpha Cress paced like a caged animal, his composure cracking with each passing minute. When the enforcers returned bearing damning evidence, exactly where I had indicated it would be, his facade shattered completely. "You've ruined everything," he hissed at me, his eyes flashing with hatred. Years of planning, of building alliances, all destroyed because a worthless blind girl couldn't stay in her place. Darius moved protectively toward me, but I raised a hand to stop him. This was my moment to stand alone. "My place was never where you thought it was, Alpha Cress," I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion tightening my throat. "And neither was yours." The tribunal's judgment came swiftly. Alpha Cress was stripped of his rank and authority, his crimes deemed severe enough to warrant permanent exile. The Southern Crescent Pack would be placed under interim leadership until a worthy successor could be determined. As the proceedings concluded, the enormity of what had transpired began to settle around me. I had lost everything familiar: my pack, my position, my father. I stood alone at a crossroads, untethered from all that had defined me. A gentle touch at my elbow startled me from my thoughts. "Eden," Darius said softly, "it's done." "Is it?" I asked, suddenly overwhelmed. "What happens now? Where do I go?" The question hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us had fully explored. Before he could answer, my father approached, his footsteps measured and deliberate. "Eden," he said, his voice stripped of its usual authority. For the first time in my memory, he sounded uncertain. "I came to say goodbye." "You're leaving with Alpha Cress?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "No," he replied. "The tribunal has offered me clemency in exchange for assisting with the transition. I was following orders, but..." He paused, struggling visibly with the admission. I should have questioned them. "Yes," I agreed simply. "You should have." A heavy silence stretched between us, years of unspoken disappointments and misunderstandings forming an almost tangible barrier. "Your grandmother would have been proud," he finally said, the words clearly difficult for him. "She always said you saw more clearly than any of us. I didn't understand what she meant until now." Tears pricked at my eyes, not for the father who had never truly seen me, but for the acknowledgement that came too late to build the relationship we might have had. "Take care of yourself, father." He nodded, then seemed to remember I couldn't see the gesture. "You too, Eden." He hesitated, then added awkwardly, "The Northern Territories are supposed to be beautiful in autumn." It was as close to a blessing as he could manage, an acknowledgement of the path opening before me. With a final nod to Darius, he turned and walked away, back toward the remnants of a pack, now forced to rebuild itself from the ground up. As the clearing emptied, Darius's hand found mine again. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "Few would have shown such courage." I shook my head, suddenly exhausted. I just did what needed to be done. That's precisely what makes it courage. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, the gentle touch oddly grounding after the chaos of the day. "Eden, about what I said before? That I'm your mate?" A small smile tugged at my lips despite everything, a rather dramatic declaration to make in the middle of a confrontation. He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly in his chest. Perhaps not my most elegant moment, but the sentiment was genuine, if premature. "Premature?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow. "I meant what I said about feeling a connection from the moment you freed me," he explained, his voice growing serious. "In our world, such instant recognitions are rare but not unheard of, but a true mating bond requires choice. Yours as much as mine." I considered this as the night breeze carried the scents of the northern wolves waiting patiently at the edge of the clearing. His pack, his family, his responsibility. And if I choose to go my own way? I asked, needing to know the full truth of what he offered. Then I would respect your decision, he replied without hesitation, and hope that our paths might cross again someday. The honesty in his voice confirmed what I had sensed from the beginning, that unlike Oliver Cress, unlike my father, unlike Alpha Cress, Darius Vale saw me not as a possession or a burden or a political tool, but as a person worthy of making my own choices. I reached up hesitantly, my fingers finding his face as they had that first night by the ravine. This time, I took my time exploring the contours of his features, the strong jaw now relaxed, the high cheekbones, the slight crinkles at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than frowned. My thumb brushed across his lower lip, feeling his sharp intake of breath at the intimate gesture. What if I choose to go with you? I asked softly. Not as your mate, not yet, but as myself, as Eden. His hand covered mine, pressing my palm more firmly against his cheek. Then the Northern Territories would welcome a talented healer with exceptional perception, and I would welcome the chance to know you better, at whatever pace feels right. The pendant at my throat seemed suddenly lighter, my grandmother's words echoing in my mind. Your blindness isn't absence, Eden. It's presence of a different kind. For the first time, I truly understood what she had meant. I had always seen the truth beneath the surface, the reality behind the words. It was that sight that had led me to free a chained wolf, to stand against injustice, to forge a new path when the old one proved false. I think I'd like that, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. To go somewhere I'm seen for who I am, not for what I lack. Darius's arms encircled me then, strong and secure, his heart beating steadily against mine. You lack nothing, Eden Fisher, he whispered against my hair, and I have never seen anyone more clearly in my life. As we walked together toward his waiting pack and the promise of a new beginning, I realized that in losing everything I had once known, I had finally found where I truly belonged, not through the bloodlines of inheritance or the politics of power, but through the simple act of compassion that had led me to free a wolf trapped in chains, unaware he was the Alpha King who would claim not just my hand, but my heart.